Imagine standing in a crowded square, the air electric with chants, the pulse of voices swelling into a single roar. 1,000 faces, yet one expression. 1,000 bodies, yet one will. In that moment, your individuality dissolves. You are no longer you, you are part of the mass. The crowd carries you like a tide, and you surrender willingly, almost gratefully. But pause, why does this surrender feel so natural? Why does it seem easier to think with the group than to think alone? This is the riddle of the herd mind. It is the paradox of human freedom, that we fear isolation more than we fear error, and thus we gladly trade our reason for belonging. Arthur Schopenhauer, with his sharp and often unsettling clarity, once remarked that a man can be himself only so long as he is alone, and if he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom. The truth hidden in his words is haunting. Most people do not want freedom. They want companionship, even at the cost of reason itself. The herd mind is not merely a collection of individuals acting together. It is an unconscious pact to renounce responsibility, to suspend critical thought, to merge into something larger and seemingly safer. It is intoxicating because it relieves us of the agony of choice. The burden of independent thought weighs heavily on the soul, but within the herd, that weight is lifted. Yet what is gained in comfort is lost in authenticity. Consider how easily hysteria spreads. Rumors ignite wars, ideologies bind generations, fashions dictate desire, and public opinion condemns or redeems with no regard for truth. One person whispering a falsehood might be ignored, but when the crowd repeats it, the falsehood becomes law. In the herd mind, perception creates reality, and truth is irrelevant. Nietzsche foresaw this danger with brutal honesty. Madness is rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, nations, and ages it is the rule. The most disturbing aspect of the herd mind is not its irrationality but its seduction. To be absorbed into the collective is to feel invulnerable, like a drop of water rejoicing in the ocean's vastness. The individual vanishes, but in that vanishing comes relief. It is a flight from the terrifying silence of the self. But the price is devastating. When the herd roars, reason is drowned out, and conscience becomes a faint whisper lost in the storm. History offers endless testimony. The great atrocities of the 20th century were not the work of isolated lunatics but of nations united under banners of ideology, pride, or fear. The herd mind legitimized horrors that no solitary conscience could have justified. Each participant told themselves, "I was not alone." Everyone believed, everyone acted. In this way, evil was diffused and disguised as normalcy. Yet the herd is not always violent. Sometimes it is quiet, soft, deceptively benign. It manifests in conformity, the way we adopt trends, opinions, and even moral values because everyone else does. The destruction here is subtle but profound. The herd does not only drive men to war, it also dulls the spirit, weakens courage, and suffocates originality. To confront the herd mind is to confront ourselves. For it is not some alien force pressing upon us from the outside. It is born of our very nature, of our terror of isolation and our longing for unity. The question is not whether we will feel its pull, we will, but whether we can resist being swallowed by it. As we descend deeper into this exploration, we must ask, if the herd mind destroys reason, what does it destroy within the human soul? What remains of individuality when truth itself bends to the will of the crowd? Why does the herd mind seize us so easily? Why do intelligent, educated individuals, those who pride themselves on reason, still surrender their thoughts to the collective voice? The answer lies less in intellect and more in the deep architecture of our psychology. At its root, the herd mind is born not from stupidity, but from fear of being alone, fear of exclusion, fear of bearing the unbearable weight of individual responsibility. We are social creatures, bound together by invisible threads of recognition and belonging. From the moment we are born, we learn that acceptance is survival. As infants, if we are not embraced, we perish. As children, if we are not included, we ache. This primal instinct never vanishes. It simply evolves into more sophisticated disguises. The herd becomes a surrogate womb, shielding us from the cold winds of solitude. To defy the herd, then, is to risk exile, and exile feels like death. Carl Jung recognized this tension when he observed, "The larger the crowd, the more negligible the individual. To melt into the collective is to feel invisible, and invisibility carries both danger and comfort. Comfort, because our mistakes disappear into the crowd's vastness. Danger, because our conscience does as well." The psychology of conformity has been proven in countless experiments. Consider the famous study by Solomon Asch. Participants were asked to compare the lengths of lines. When alone, almost everyone answered correctly. But when placed in a group where actors deliberately gave the wrong answer, the majority conformed, even when the truth was obvious to the naked eye. The terror of being the lone dissenter was greater than the pull of reality itself. This simple test reveals a profound truth. The herd mind does not merely obscure judgment. It rewrites it. The fear of isolation amplifies this effect. To stand apart is to risk ridicule, scorn, or abandonment. In tribal societies, exclusion was tantamount to a death sentence. And although modern life no longer punishes nonconformity with physical death, the psychological wound of social exile can feel just as lethal. The herd mind exploits this fear, whispering, "Think what others think, believe what they believe, or you will suffer alone." But here lies the paradox. To conform is to avoid loneliness, yet it breeds another kind of loneliness. The loneliness of betraying one's own truth. Sartre captured this torment when he said, "If you are lonely when you're alone, you are in bad company." We deceive ourselves by thinking that belonging to the herd will ease our alienation. But instead, it deepens it. For what connection exists between masks? When everyone hides behind conformity, who truly meets whom? The tragedy is that this conformity often masquerades as morality, progress, or common sense. But look closer. Is it truly your conviction you defend, or the crowd's? Do you believe what you profess, or do you simply fear the cost of dissent? To answer honestly requires a courage most would rather not possess. It is not merely peer pressure we fear, it is the confrontation with ourselves. When stripped of the herd's voice, we face the silence of our own thoughts, and silence can be terrifying. In that silence, we are forced to ask questions without ready-made answers, to wrestle with truths that may estrange us from others. This solitude is where true reason is born, but it is also where the herd mind wages its fiercest battle, by making solitude unbearable. Thus, the psychology of conformity is not just about obedience. It is about refuge. The herd offers a counterfeit safety, a counterfeit truth, and most tragically, a counterfeit self. To reject it is to risk everything. To embrace it is to risk never discovering who we really are. So we arrive at a dangerous crossroads. The individual standing against the mass. What does it mean to resist the herd mind, and what forces are unleashed upon those who dare? This is the battlefield of philosophy and history alike. A battle that will lead us to Schopenhauer's unflinching dissection of human will and the crushing weight of the collective. To understand why the herd mind destroys reason, we must descend into the depths of Arthur Schopenhauer's philosophy, where human life is not guided by logic but by an irrational force he called the will. This will is not reason, not morality, not enlightened choice. It is blind striving, ceaseless hunger, a force that uses us rather than obeys us. The will pushes us to survive, to reproduce, to compete, to dominate. Reason, Schopenhauer argued, is only a fragile servant of this deeper power. If the will is the true master of our existence, then the herd mind is one of its most insidious disguises. The individual who joins the crowd believes they are seeking truth or justice, but beneath the surface, it is the will that drives them, the will to belong, to secure safety, to magnify their own significance by merging with something larger. The herd becomes a mirror that reflects back to each member a sense of power they do not truly possess. In solitude, the will's grip feels oppressive. We are painfully aware of our vulnerability, our insignificance, our eventual death. But in the herd, the will offers an illusion. Here you are strong, here you are eternal, here you are many rather than one. The herd mind is thus not only an escape from reason, it is an escape from the terror of existence itself. Schopenhauer saw through this deception, writing, "Man can indeed do what he wants, but he cannot will what he wants. In the crowd, we imagine we are free, but in truth we are doubly enslaved, first by the will and second by the herd through which the will operates. Consider the fever of nationalism, or the ecstasy of religious revivals, or the rage of political mobs. Each of these phenomena appears to elevate the individual into a grander purpose, yet all of them reduce him to a tool of the collective will. The soldier who rushes into battle chanting the slogans of his nation is not acting from independent reason. He is swept up in a tidal wave of inherited passions, drilled into him by culture and amplified by the crowd. He believes he acts nobly, but he acts predictably, almost mechanically, as if the herd itself had seized the strings of his will. This is where Schopenhauer's pessimism cuts sharply into the heart of human pride. We like to think of ourselves as rational agents, weighing evidence, shaping destiny, making choices from free thought. But when we examine history, how often has reason truly guided civilization? How often has the cold clarity of truth triumphed over the intoxicating cries of the herd? Almost never. The herd mind has always been the ruling principle, and reason its fragile casualty. Aldous Huxley, echoing this insight a century later, observed, "The propagandist's purpose is to make one set of people forget that certain other sets of people are human. This forgetting is only possible when reason has already been drowned by the herd's emotional chorus." The will does not care for truth. It cares for survival, victory, dominance. Reason becomes expendable, sacrificed at the altar of collective frenzy. And yet, Schopenhauer does not leave us without a path forward. If the herd mind is the will's mask, then liberation lies in stripping the mask away. Solitude, aesthetic contemplation, and the refusal to be seduced by mass opinion. These become acts of resistance, fragile but vital. To reclaim reason, one must first reclaim oneself from the blind impulses that drive the crowd. But what does such resistance look like in practice? Is it possible to stand against the current of the herd without being crushed by it? The next step in our exploration will draw us into the heart of history, where individuals who dared to resist the herd paid a heavy price, and where the drama of conformity and dissent shaped the destiny of nations. The truth of the herd mind is not abstract. It has shaped the course of history with terrifying consistency. Time and again, we see how entire nations, seduced by collective illusions, abandon reason in exchange for unity, only to awaken in the ruins they themselves created. The individual who resists becomes an anomaly, often a martyr, remembered only when the tide of madness finally recedes. Consider the rise of totalitarian regimes in the 20th century. Ordinary citizens, teachers, shopkeepers, bureaucrats, did not wake each morning intent on committing evil. Yet, when swallowed by the collective fervor of ideology, they carried out atrocities with mechanical obedience. The Nazi rallies at Nuremberg, seas of arms raised in synchronized salute, were not spectacles of strength but spectacles of surrender. Each individual dissolved into the mass, and the mass became a weapon aimed at humanity itself. Here, the herd mind did not just destroy reason, it annihilated conscience. But this pattern is far older. Ancient Rome, once a republic, surrendered its liberty to emperors because the herd demanded bread and circuses rather than the burdens of citizenship. Revolutionary France, crying liberty and fraternity, devolved into the reign of terror, where the mob guillotined thousands in the name of virtue. In both cases, the crowd's passion dictated reality, and reason's voice was drowned in the drumbeat of collective hysteria. What is striking is not merely the destruction wrought by the herd, but the silence of the few who dared to resist. Those who spoke against the madness were branded traitors, heretics, lunatics. Their solitude was unbearable to most, but essential for truth. Nietzsche's warning resounds. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will often be lonely and sometimes frightened. But no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. Owning oneself, this is precisely what the herd mind forbids. To claim independent reason in the face of collective passion is to declare war on the very mechanism by which societies bind themselves. History shows us that dissenters are rarely rewarded in their lifetimes. Socrates was executed for corrupting the youth by teaching them to question the consensus of Athens. Giordano Bruno was burned for refusing to recant truths that challenged ecclesiastical authority. Countless whistleblowers, reformers, and prophets met the same fate. The herd could not tolerate them because their presence exposed the lie at its core, that unity is worth more than truth. And yet, history also vindicates these figures. Their deaths, their ostracism, their solitude. These became seeds planted in the soil of human progress. When the fever of the herd finally broke, reason returned, and the courage of the few illuminated the ruins. In this sense, history is written by the herd, but corrected by the individual. The crowd creates the narrative, but the solitary thinker rescues truth from oblivion. Still, the question remains, why are we so easily caught in this cycle? Why does the herd mind always rise again, in new forms, under new banners, with new slogans but the same annihilation of reason? The answer lies not just in fear of isolation, but in the deep psychological need for meaning. When individuals cannot endure the chaos of life alone, the herd offers ready-made purpose, ready-made enemies, ready-made truths. The tragedy is that these meanings are false, and their cost is devastating. Viktor Frankl, who survived the ultimate expression of herd-driven cruelty, wrote, "The salvation of man is through love and in love. The herd mind offers the counterfeit of love, belonging without authenticity, unity without compassion. The individual who resists must therefore rediscover a deeper source of meaning than the herd can provide." Thus, history teaches us a grim but necessary lesson. Reason can survive only in the hands of individuals willing to endure solitude, sacrifice, and misunderstanding. The herd will always rise, but so too will those who stand against it. Next, we must confront the modern world, where the herd no longer gathers only in streets and squares, but in digital spaces, where conformity spreads faster and deeper than ever before. The herd mind of the past gathered in plazas, stadiums, and temples. Today, it gathers in digital spaces, on glowing screens that never sleep, in endless feeds where opinions rise and fall with the speed of lightning. If ancient mobs needed days to spread hysteria, the modern herd mind requires only seconds. A single post, a single headline, a single manipulated image can ripple across millions, sparking outrage, adoration, or hysteria before reason has the chance to blink. At first glance, the digital world appears to celebrate individuality. Social media promises self-expression, a stage where every voice can be heard. But in truth, it has engineered the most efficient machinery of conformity ever created. Algorithms are designed not to liberate us, but to bind us to the herd's pulse, amplifying what the majority clicks, shares, or approves. What emerges is not individuality, but the illusion of it. Endless profiles that differ in surface, yet move in unison beneath. Jean-Paul Sartre's warning echoes with eerie relevance. Hell is other people. In the digital age, this hell is not merely their presence but their judgment, quantified and displayed in real time. Likes, shares, followers, cancellations. Each notification is a whisper from the herd, a reminder that our worth is measured not by truth but by approval. The fear of isolation is no longer abstract. It is visible in numbers, a fluctuating score of our belonging. Cancel culture, viral outrage, and mob-driven campaigns illustrate the modern herd mind in full force. One careless word, one unpopular opinion, and the digital crowd descends with merciless uniformity. What centuries ago might have required inquisitions or tribunals can now be enacted instantly by millions behind screens. Reason has no place here. The verdict is emotional, performative, and contagious. The individual stands no chance against the tidal wave of the digital mob, except in rare cases where solitude is chosen as armor. But the danger runs deeper. The digital herd does not only punish dissent, it shapes desire. What we buy, what we wear, what we think we want is often no longer chosen by us but dictated by trends circulating in invisible currents. The market and the masses now intertwine in perfect synergy. Corporations feed the herd what it craves, while the herd validates itself by consuming what corporations provide. Freedom of choice, once the crowning virtue of modernity, becomes little more than the freedom to choose among predetermined options. Aldous Huxley foresaw this with uncanny accuracy in Brave New World. He warned that tyranny in the future might not come with jackboots but with pleasure, with endless distractions that pacify rather than oppress. The digital herd embodies this prophecy. The more we scroll, the more we consume, the less we think. Reason is not censored, it is drowned in noise, trivialized until it seems irrelevant. And yet, there is a more subtle danger. In the digital herd, truth itself becomes fluid. Deepfakes, misinformation, echo chambers, these do not simply spread falsehoods. They create realities tailored for each group. Once, the herd at least shared a common narrative, however distorted. Now, digital herds fracture into countless micro-collectives, each convinced of its exclusive truth. The destruction of reason here is nearly complete. Not only is truth rejected, but the very concept of objective truth dissolves. The individual who resists this machinery must summon a rare strength. To pause before reacting, to question before sharing, to refuse the easy seductions of digital conformity. These are acts of rebellion. They demand solitude in an environment designed to annihilate it. Carl Jung's insight becomes a warning for our time. The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence. It is to act with yesterday's logic. If we face the digital herd with the old comforts of blind belonging, we will vanish into its algorithms without ever realizing we have surrendered. And so, the crisis intensifies. If the herd mind has colonized not only our public squares but also our private screens, is there any hope left for reason, for individuality, for the soul? The answer lies not in despair but in an inner revolution. The rediscovery of solitude, courage, and authentic meaning. It is here, in our final step, that we must ask, what does it take to resist the herd mind, to reclaim reason, and to live as an individual in an age that worships conformity? If the herd mind is inevitable, if its pull is universal and its seductions irresistible, is resistance even possible? Or are we condemned to live as fragments of a mass, our reason crushed beneath the boots of conformity? This is the question that shadows every age, and perhaps never more urgently than now. Yet history, philosophy, and psychology all whisper the same answer. Resistance is rare, but it is possible. And when it occurs, it transforms not only individuals but civilizations. The first step is solitude. Schopenhauer insisted that true individuality cannot exist without it. A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. Solitude strips away the intoxication of the herd's voice, forcing us to confront our own thoughts without external validation. It is in solitude that we learn whether our beliefs are truly ours or merely borrowed from the chorus. But solitude is not merely the absence of others, it is the presence of the self. It is a return to inner clarity, a painful but liberating exposure to one's naked mind. The second step is courage. To resist the herd is to risk exclusion, ridicule, and even destruction. But without courage, reason remains a fragile theory. Courage transforms solitude into action. Nietzsche's words reverberate. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. This struggle is not an intellectual exercise. It is a lived battle demanding sacrifice. Socrates drank the hemlock, Bruno faced the flames, countless others were silenced or erased. Yet their courage preserved the dignity of reason when the herd sought to obliterate it. The third step is meaning. Viktor Frankl, forged in the crucible of the concentration camps, declared that man's survival depends on his capacity to find meaning, even in suffering. The herd offers counterfeit meaning, easy slogans, false enemies, shallow belonging. But authentic meaning arises from within, from aligning one's life with values that transcend the approval of the crowd. When an individual finds such meaning, the herd's seductions weaken. For no roar of the crowd can replace the quiet conviction of a life anchored in truth. Yet resistance is not purely negative. It is not only about rejecting the herd, but about creating new possibilities. The solitary thinker, the dissenter, the artist, the mystic, these figures carve paths through the wilderness of conformity, offering others a glimpse of freedom. Their lives testify that individuality is not an escape from humanity but its highest expression. To reclaim reason is to reclaim the capacity to love, to create, to suffer authentically rather than mechanically. Of course, no one escapes the herd entirely. We are social beings, and complete isolation is neither possible nor desirable. The task, then, is balance, to participate in community without dissolving into it, to share in humanity without surrendering to its madness. This balance requires constant vigilance, a willingness to question even the most sacred convictions of one's age. Aldous Huxley warned that most human beings have an almost infinite capacity for taking things for granted. To resist the herd is to shatter this complacency, to see the world as it is, not as the crowd insists it must be. It is to live awake in an age of sleepwalking, to think when thinking is dangerous, to speak when silence is demanded. In the end, the herd mind destroys reason only if we allow it. The crowd may roar, but within each of us lies the power to choose solitude over noise, courage over compliance, truth over illusion. The price is high, loneliness, misunderstanding, sacrifice, but the reward is immeasurable. The recovery of the self, the dignity of authentic thought, the possibility of true freedom. And so the challenge falls to us. Will we vanish into the herd, comforted by its embrace yet stripped of our reason? Or will we dare the solitude, endure the exile, and claim the privilege of owning ourselves? The choice is ours, but the clock is always ticking, and the herd is always waiting.